might say nobody doing it better. Y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show. I'm your host, Malik Wright. Joined by my co-host, as always, we got Daniel Alameda. We've got Marissa on the ones and twos, and we've got a lot to discuss. Before we jump into it like we do each and every single day, I want to ask that you guys do us a huge favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. We have content coming out each and every single day on the channel, but I want to make sure we jump into it, Daniel. There's a ridiculous amount of conversation going on right now after what transpired yesterday. We saw Tua Tagovailoa go out with another concussion. And it feels like this is the same reoccurring theme that has been happening for almost the last 2 years. You know, I would say that last year, it wasn't as big in the news cycle, but I remember when we first moved here to Cincinnati, that was a topic of discussion. And it was back when we had our morning show before.
Yeah.
So it was kind of crazy that this is the discussion right here, right now. But this recent one has teammates, coaches, players around the league concerned for Tua's well-being, which has been having the question is now being posed: should Tua Tagovailoa retire? Should he consider retirement? Because at what point does your mental health, right? At what point does your capability physically take importance versus you continuously playing the game that you love? So it's a very touchy topic because I am no doctor. Daniel's no doctor. Nobody that is on this show that you're going to hear speak today is a doctor. No one has the jurisdiction to so to speak, to tell him what he should do. I just gotta say, I gotta think about Tua the man before the football player, and I think it's an unfortunate situation. Happy that the guy got his bag from Miami. I really am, because when unfortunate situations take place like this, it causes you to step back and reflect a little bit more. You know, being a guy that has watched Tua, being an Alabama Crimson Tide fan, injuries unfortunately have plagued him throughout his career. Now they haven't always been concussions and head injuries, but they have been lower extremity injuries, things of that nature. And the willpower that this guy has had to keep getting up and fighting time and time again, man. I think that there's no question about his resolve, right? And how much he wants to win and how much he wants to be out there for his teammates and how much he wants to be a winning quarterback for the Miami Dolphins organization. But at some point, you have to start to consider the optics, and the optics right now don't look amazing for Tua. Daniel, I really want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think with Tua and how I looked at it, I went back and saw, what was his entire history like with his concussions. There wasn't a reported concussion at Alabama, but when you look at the past 2 years, it's pretty simple. He had one against the Bills. A couple weeks later, he had one against the Bengals. And then 4 weeks after that, he had one against the Packers. And the one against the Bengals was the one that we all saw on national television, right? And that was the one where it looked brutal. And you hate to say it, but at this point, what I would be talking about potential retirement. And a lot of people are discussing, the money aspect of things. Should the Dolphins pay him money? Let's just backtrack first off. Tua earned this contract. And yes, you could say maybe he's a little overpaid. Maybe he's not on the top tier superstars. Like, his performance before yesterday's concussion was abysmal on the field. It was abysmal. And he wasn't looking great. The Miami Dolphins were getting walloped. But does that mean that, Tua doesn't deserve the money? Let's say if he were to retire, no, he still deserves his money, especially all the guarantees. But I would be looking at Tua if I was the Dolphins head coach, if I was the Dolphins coaching staff, the organization, the doctors around there, and I'd be saying, hey, Tua, let's have a serious conversation. Maybe it is best that you walk away from this game because it's scary. And obviously, when you look at Tua's concussions, maybe his are much more, on the dramatic side, not saying he's making it dramatic, but when he has a concussion, a lot of, like, you can tell the post, like, his arms are moving, a lot of scary stuff happens. And that's not to say other quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford, when he gets concussions, but he just plays it off. I think that's something that's, not the actual person. Tua, I would definitely be considering retirement. And it sucks because the Dolphins have built a lot around Tua, and they have, they just gave him his big contract, and they just gave him that vote of confidence to say, hey, you are a franchise quarterback. You're the guy that we want to go ahead and try to push us to the Super Bowl. And if I'm the Dolphins, I'm having that conversation with him, and I'm looking at my other options right now because as the organization, that's how you got to cover your ass. And I think there is a world where Tua looks at himself and said, hey, maybe the rest of the season, let me just sit out, because that would totally be, nobody would even bat an eye if Tua were to retire today. And that's at least a good thing that I can say from the entire NFL world, that even people on social media are coming together. And I wasn't seeing a lot of hate for Tua. So that's the one thing in a very, today in today's negative society. I was very happy and delighted to see that on social media, because a lot of people are trolls and a lot of people are trying to make jokes and try to be funny, especially after a lot of situations that happened even last year after some of the DeMar Hamlin stuff. We saw a lot of jokes flying around, and to be honest, I didn't see any of that. I just saw a lot of people saying, hey, this dude, this could affect your life, and this could have dramatic impact on the rest of his life, not just his football career, but his 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. This could impact how his life is and how he's going about his day-to-day duties. So me personally, how I would look at Tua, I would say, hey man, let's have a serious conversation. And the on the field stuff is important. And yes, maybe if you were to play, you would get more of your contract, but your guarantee is, I believe, is 90 something million dollars. If you were to walk away today, you should be fine. You shouldn't have to worry about what you have to do day to day to make money. You should be set for life, and you shouldn't have to go out there. And this would be risking your life at this point. Obviously, every football player says, we're willing to risk our life. At this point, when you look at Tua, repeated time and time again concussions, that's not healthy. And that's what they say. It's not always the first concussion. It's what happens as soon as you get that second one. That's the one that's dangerous and potentially deadly. So, like I said, I'm happy that people are talking about a potential retirement. I'm happy that we're talking about it because it's not the actual on-field play, but this is important to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. It isn't a serious topic to talk about. And it's unfortunate because I really root for that guy, man.
Yep.
Root for a lot of these players, man. But I really root for that guy because he's dealt with a lot of adversity, a lot of not even turmoil, but more so a lot of people doubting his capabilities, man. And I felt like last year was such a high for him. And he really got to show the rest of the league and fans alike what he was capable of. And to see that unfortunate situation take place, man, at some point you just got to put that into I guess the primary focus. And at the end of the day, Tua is gonna make the best decision for him, for his family, playing career aside, right? And if he chooses to step back on the gridiron and is like, hey, I want to play football again, that's something I'll support, obviously. But I think it's one of those things where it's just a freak accident. And I see there's a couple comments. We appreciate the comments too as well that you guys are getting into. Um, uh, we got one of our guys in the comment section saying he could have avoided this concussion easily. Why is he diving headfirst when he has this well-known issue? Slide. And I agree. Listen, it's one of those things where I don't think that Tua made a conscientious decision to, let me dive headfirst. I think it's in the moment, right? These things happen, in real time. It's not a situation in which he's like, hey, maybe he felt in that moment that was the best course of action because it was a weird little play. Obviously, Hamlin was right next to him, and maybe he felt like he didn't have enough opportunity or enough room to pull up and actually hit that slide and stuff like that. But that being said, as well, we've seen Tua slide, and we've seen him get hit as well in his head, and we've seen him have concussions through that. It's not all just diving first, so it's not guaranteed one way or the other. I don't want to fault the guy or beat the guy down because he didn't slide the way that we're accustomed to seeing to quarterback slide. These defenders, sometimes it's hard for them to let up, and that was a situation in which DeMar wasn't even going at him. He just went into DeMar's stomach or sternum area, and that happened. So it's one of those things where it's an unfortunate situation all the way around, no matter which way you slice it. We could say, hey, maybe he slid and maybe it will be a different outcome. Again, I'm no doctor. We don't know what the outcome could have been, but I think we all can agree as an NFL community. I think we can all come together and say that this is an unfortunate situation. And, with Tua being one of 32, right?
Yep.
Of the most important position in all of sports, I think it creates a little bit more focus as to what he's dealing with. And I think that's why we hate to be so hyper focused about it, but I think that's what makes us talk about this right now.
Mhm.
Want to ask you guys to do us a huge favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. We have content going out each and every single day, and we just appreciate that you guys choose us to spend our Monday, or not Monday, our mornings with, even though you do spend your Monday mornings with us as well. I want to get on over to week 2 of the NFL. Obviously, later on the show, we were talking about our favorite bets, getting you guys all geared up for that. Hopefully, you make some money. Because we definitely had some prop bets yesterday that hit, and for obviously the Tua situation is probably not something I want to necessarily cover because I think that his personal personal life is way more important than his playing career. So I don't want to even jump into those bets and stuff like that we talked about. But
Yeah.
let's talk about this week 2 slate of games, Daniel. What games are exciting to you?
There's a lot of games. I actually really like this slate a lot more than I
Mhm.
did week 1. And a lot of it has to do with the storylines that just happened after week 1. Let me just run through a couple of them. The first one that I'm actually most intrigued in, and it is a weird one, it's the Chargers versus Panthers. And the reason why I'm really excited about this game, and once again, if you guys want to give your predictions or have any questions, drop them down in the comments. The Chargers got a lot of hype after last week. Jim Harbaugh and the new run game, J.K. Dobbins, 120 yards. Oh, is he back? Greg Roman and their power rush scheme. I want to see, can they once again do it again? Obviously, it's against an inferior opponent. But 2, this is going to tell me a lot about the Panthers because the Panthers played a divisional game in week 1. They played a Saints team that blitzed them a ton. They got absolutely destroyed by the Saints. And I think we'll be able to tell what's going to go on with this Panthers team very, very quickly. Is it a team where Dave Canales gets fired after his first year? Is it a team where Bryce Young, they've got to, move off the number 1 overall pick earlier than any other team has within the past 15 years? Or is it a team where they start to bounce back and they show some resemblance that, hey, we're a team that can fight and we're not just going to be done after the season? So there's a lot of questions to be answered. And I really want to see for Bryce Young specifically, is he a potential franchise quarterback? Because right now he has looked abysmal. He's looked terrible. And I do think a lot of that is the situation. So you're going to go up against a team of the Chargers that they're a very good test. If you can't do anything against the Chargers, if the Chargers go and destroy the Panthers like the Saints did, we're going to see a very quick downward spiral for this Panthers organization. And that's what concerns me when I look at the Panthers. What do you do at that point? You just put in a new regime. You think that everything's going to go right. And then there's a chance where you got to go potentially find a new quarterback. So I'm curious to see what happens with that game, and especially the Chargers. Can they keep it up?
Can I just say this real quick? I feel for Panthers fans for a second.
Mhm.
Let me just say this. All you turn on and you see are people bagging on your team. That's all you see right now. You see people bagging on your team. You see people talking about how your quarterback's a bust. You hear people talking about your inept owner. Some stuff I agree with there in that statement. Some stuff I don't. Here's what I will say. Nothing else matters besides what happens in those 4 walls. And that sounds very, very cliche. But I've seen teams with no hope turn things around. It doesn't matter what national media pundits say. It doesn't matter what people like me, like Daniel with the mic say about your team. Nothing else matters besides what happens in those four walls. Everyone's entitled to an opinion. But I choose to the side of optimism, I'll say. I choose to believe that the Panthers can figure it out. I choose to believe that the Panthers hired the right guy, the guy that was able to turn Baker Mayfield's career around. Let me be very clear. I think that there's a world. I think that there's a world in which Bryce Young can salvage his career.
Yeah.
I think that there's a world in which, although it's looked rough to start, I think there's a world in which he can get it all together. This was never going to be a 2-week project. And I feel like in today's media, I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes we try to speed up the clock for guys. Remember, Bryce Young was not given the same opportunity that maybe a Jordan Love was to sit, to learn. Jordan Love was given that opportunity. So much so as we were thinking maybe Jordan Love is a bust. He came in and he lit the league on fire. I think that not all situations are equal. And I get it. He was the first overall pick. With being the first overall pick, a lot of hype comes into it. But remember, back in the 90s, guys, it used to be the norm. It used to be the norm for young quarterbacks to sit, to learn, to mature. CJ Stroud, phenomenal quarterback. Phenomenal quarterback. Blew away everybody's expectations, mine included. I think he went into a very stable situation with a coach in DeMeco Ryans who had his stuff together. Bobby Slowick, who had his stuff together, that played to his strength. The Texans were already coming out of a situation of dysfunction. And the next guy they hired had his stuff together. So I'll just say this. Dave Canales is a young head coach. Bryce Young is a young player. It might look ugly this year. Hell, it might look ugly next year. I have no idea. But there's a reason why these young quarterbacks get 4 years on a contract and then a 5th-year option. Because guess what? Great things sometimes take time. And Bryce Young could very well be a bust. I want to make sure I'm very clear. I want to make sure y'all know there's no Alabama bias here. Bryce Young, I had my concerns when he was coming out of the draft. My concerns with Bryce Young was things like, hey, he's very talented. He has the ability to use his legs, but sometimes he's gun shy. Sometimes he doesn't know if he should. Sometimes he's stuck with, I'm going to be a pocket passer. I'm going to take the check down. And yes, Benjamin Harrison, I love what you said. They need to grow together. They do. But I want to really just say, hey, let's peel the reins back, media included. Let's all of us peel the reins back a little bit. He's still a young player. Dave Canales is still a young coach. Let's allow them the opportunity to get this right. Nobody should have on the tip of their tongue Bryce Young is playing for his football career or starting job or, after week 2 of year 2 in his NFL career. Come on. Let's deal in reality. Bryce Young, he could be a bust. I'll say it again. But let's allow him to mature. Let's allow him to be in a stable situation versus the one that he came into. I think that's pretty fair to say.
Yeah, and that's my issue is I don't know if it's stable right now. And that's what we'll see the rest of the season. That's just what concerns me. And we'll give, like you said, we will give Dave Canales time. It just concerns me with the way that they're going about their business. And they went out this offseason. Yes, they went out and they added some talent to the offensive line. They went out, they added Deontay Johnson. And I guess we'll see. It just concerns me with what I saw. And I really hope that the offensive line and his weapons do him some favors. And especially it is the job of the coach that he's got to scheme up some things for Bryce Young because week 1, it looked abysmal and it just didn't look easy. So that's my hope for week 2. I hope that they start off the week and they get some easy looks in because that's first couple plays of their offense. They were trying to go deep. He got sacked twice and he saw major blitzes coming at him. and there was no checks. There was nothing from the offensive line, just straight up 5 wide, and that's what concerns me. So,
Yeah.
I hope that they get it right. And this is a good test. Khalil
Yeah.
Mack, Joey Bosa.
It's a hell of a test, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I want to get to a comment here back to our previous conversation we were having, and I make sure we'll continue to get through our week 2 thing, but I just don't want this to get buried in the comment section. James O'Hara, I appreciate you too, my man. Says, Malik Wright, you've done a great job harvesting talent with young people following their dreams. Congrats, sir. Separately, if you were in Tua's shoes, what would you do, James? First and foremost, I appreciate the words, the comments. I really do. It means a lot to me. I take pride in what we build here at TWSN. Hopefully, we're the next up and coming big thing in the sports media landscape. And if I was Tua's shoes, I personally retire. I just would. You know, these guys, you know, I talked to a lot of NFL players around the league, and, you know, one sentiment that I hear from them is they say that we're playing a young man's game, playing a child's game. So essentially, they already feel like they're on borrowed time playing a game that they love. They get paid millions to play a game that they love, that they've been playing since Pee Wee, right? Some high school, very few just college. But in all seriousness, they're playing a young man's game. And the dream is to make it to the NFL. And when you make it to the NFL, the dream is to get that second contract. Tua's did it. No matter what people think, people say, Tua made it. If Tua walked away now at his young age and chose to do something different with his life, he made millions. He took care of his family. He never has to work again if he doesn't want to. So for me, I would personally, I would choose retirement. That's just me. But again, I also don't have the heart to be an NFL player. I don't have the heart to, go out there, lead a team, and get hit. That's just not me. Maybe be a little different. They say, Malik, would you put the mic down? Maybe my opinion would be different. And my stance would probably be a little bit different. But again, different profession. I feel for Tua. And hopefully, hopefully he's being guided in the right direction and he makes the choice that's best for his future. Not playing future, but his future. Appreciate the question, James. Want to get back to some of the week 2 discussion. Sean Brennan says Mahomes would not be the player he is if he didn't sit and learn from Alex Smith year 1. We can't rush these kids. Everyone's a lot of them. 100%. 100%. I think situation matters. I think the ability to learn, grow, and not deal with so much pressure is so important, man. It's so important. So for me, I think it's a situation in I think it's just a situation in which we just got to allow these guys to grow. Drew Garrison says, what if they told Daniel he had to put FanDuel down? I think he'd go to DraftKings. I don't, Daniel is, and I mean this in the most respectful. Daniel's a sportsbook whore. He will go wherever the best odds are. For me, I'm the kind of guy where, if I ain't partner with you, I'm using other apps. That's just to be honest with you. If I'm partnered with you, it ain't happening. Oh, you like this shirt? So this is Daniel's custom line. Someone says, "Oh, we like." Benjamin Harris says that "Let's Have a Damn Day" shirt is fire. This is Daniel's custom line. We call that the Alameda line.
All right.
And you can actually get that. You actually can purchase that right now if you just type in TWSN in the clutch. You can get that. Listen, that's a pretty damn cool shirt. He doesn't wear it as often as he
I need
used
a
to.
new one. I think
after
my last bet that I lost,
I mean, that's not good promotion, bro, for people that are trying to buy TWSN stuff, man.
Hey,
you said you lost it, so it shows you how much he cares about it, right? But I want to talk about some games that I'm looking forward to. This week is a weird week in the NFL. There are a couple of games where it's like, maybe could be something, but I'll start here. The Steelers versus the Broncos. That's an interesting game to me because I really believe that I think the Steelers are going to start 2-0. They are in a situation in which week 1 they faced a quarterback that came in with a lot of hype that is not even really able to maneuver the pocket as much. And, they did such a good job just stymieing him. And then you're taking on Bo Nix week 2. Taking on Bo Nix week 2. Week 2, Bo Nix, he struggled with what he struggled with, right? He's a young quarterback too. But, I think that's a lot to ask him, to deal with the pass rush of a TJ Watt, especially because I think they're dealing with some injuries at the tackle position right now with Garrett Bowles. I think TJ Watt's going to have a field day.
Mhm.
And I'll say this to Broncos country. You guys are facing a very tough stretch of games from a defensive standpoint. I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it. Just my 2 cents. Daniel, what say you?
I am not going to go to the betting segment, but I will say that there is this game should not be this close, in my opinion. Like, it is a 2-point spread. Bo Nix looked good. I liked how he looked in week 1. Yes, he had the 2 interceptions. TJ Watt is going to make life a living hell for that dude. And if I were him, I'm probably gonna have nightmares after that Sunday. And it's because TJ Watt is on a track. I believe he will be definitely 1 or 2 for defensive player of the year. He dominated in week 1 against the Falcons. And if he did that against them, I've got a strong feeling that he's going to go into Denver and have at least 2 sacks. So the Broncos haven't established a run game. I do think that this is a game, though, if the Broncos have a path to victory, I think we could see a big Javonte Williams day. And I think that's something Sean Payton has been very good in the past at game planning. And even last year when we saw with Russell Wilson, they had some great game plans, to kind of cater to his strengths. I think we could see a little better performance on the public's eye from Bo Nix this week, but it's going to be a very, very slow-paced game. It's going to be a grimy game. Justin Fields is starting, and I think the Broncos defense can make life a living hell for that dude as well. So this is a game I'd be watching if I'm interested in just the 2 storylines. But yeah, I agree with you, Malik. Bo Nix is he's in for a long, long day, and this is not a great way for him to open up his career with a brutal schedule. But hey, iron sharpens iron. So
yeah, man. So we got our guy Keith 330 in the comment section. He says, "Love the new show. At some point, can you break down your opinion on Nate versus Tony, or is this morning show just football? Who day?" Brother, appreciate you. Thank you for spending your mornings with me. This is not just football. We talk about everything. We give you our favorite bets. I'm going to be talking UFC 306, giving you guys an inside look into my mind and how it works for this upcoming card to help make your weekend profitable. That's my job. I don't know, Nate versus Tony. I'm not exactly sure what fight that is, if you will. Because I don't think Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson fighting again. But if you could just tell me what exactly fight you're talking about, I'd be happy to talk it through. Again, on this show, you get everything. You get boxing, you get NFL, you get NBA, you get UFC, you get MLB. You get so much stuff when we're in season. And you know what else you get on this show? You get fantasy football. You get fantasy football. You get to sit down and learn from people who are a lot smarter than me in this space. Listen, I retired a long time ago for fantasy football because, to be honest with you, I was just too goddamn good at fantasy football. And I said, you know what? I'm tired of taking people's money. I'm tired of beating people in fantasy football. I'm going to let people like Mike O'Hara, one of TWSN'S lead analysts here, get the floor and let people, in on how to make their fantasy football lineups work for them. So without further ado, Mike O'Hara, appreciate you joining the show, my man.
Of course, happy to be here on Fantasy Football Friday. It's going to be a good one. Big slate of games coming up. I mean, last night was supposed to be the treat of the week. It didn't really hold up its end of the bargain, but it is what it is. And we've got 13 games on the main slate and then 2 primetime games. So it should be a fun time. I'm here to talk some start sits, give some guys that you should get into your lineup and maybe some guys you should think twice about.
Absolutely. And while we have him here, we're going to be joined. So this is Fantasy Friday here at TWSN. We're joined by Michael O'Hara, of course. Then after Michael O'Hara, we'll be joined by another TWSN analyst, fantasy analyst, and that's going to be Steve Bradshaw. And for your leagues coming up, guys, I want you guys to drop your questions down in the comment section for Mike. Mike's going to try to answer them to the best of his ability to help make your week 2 profitable for you to win in your fantasy football leagues everywhere. So, Mike, I got to ask you, what are some week 2 matchups that you're just salivating over, that you absolutely love, or maybe some under the radar stuff that we're not talking about?
Yeah, starting with the running back spot, I'm really excited about Brian Robinson Jr. This week. I was pretty high on him coming into the season. I just thought he had clamps on the rushing work in Washington and was going to be the 1A ahead of Austin Eckler, and that's exactly what we saw last week. It was a tough matchup, a tough game script against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Commanders were playing from behind for most of the game, but Brian Robinson still found his way. He handled 86% of the running back carries. He was out carried by Jaden Daniels, but the coaching staff in Washington came out and said that they don't want Jaden Daniels rushing the ball 16 times a game. So I expect Brian Robinson to shoulder more of the workload moving forward. He also saw steady work as a receiver. He saw a 17% target share and even ranked third among running backs last week in yards per route run. So he was all around from an analytical perspective. It was a pretty strong profile for Brian Robinson Jr. in terms of what we expect him to do fantasy-wise. And then last week, this was just a game that he was set up to fail, and somehow he didn't. I talked about the game script. They were playing from behind most of the game. And then Brian Robinson Jr. was tackled at the 1 yard line twice last week, and he was vultured by Jaden Daniels both times. So if one of those goes his way, I think we're viewing his week last week in a very much of a different light. So he was set up to fail and just didn't. And now we're moving forward into week 2. He's got a phenomenal matchup against the Giants. I expect this game to either be close or even see the Commanders playing with a lead for most of the game. So the game script should be in his favor. I expect him to still handle the majority of the rushing work out of the backfield and potentially even see some pretty steady receiving work like we saw last week. I think this is a guy who you can start at your RB2 with confidence.
I'm definitely buying Brian Robinson Jr. We got a good question from Sean Brennan. He said 3 players for 2 spots. Saints wide receiver Chris Olave. I believe that's Rashee Rice and Malik Neighbors. 3 wide receivers. Which 2 out of 3 would you play?
So this is an enviable spot to be in. I wish I was having to make these sorts of decisions. I really think you have to go with Rashee Rice in this spot, as well as Malik Neighbors. Starting with Rashee Rice, he is just I'm going to be so excited to watch this guy this year. This guy dominates the underneath portion of the field, and with Mahomes firing on all cylinders in this offense all the way back, it's going to be fireworks all year. Rashee Rice, he saw a 32% target share in week 1, which is just absolutely ridiculous for someone in a Patrick Mahomes offense. And then this was a great stat from Scott Barrett over at Fantasy Points. On the slant route alone, Rice had 6 targets for 5 receptions and 94 yards, which was the most targets and yards on the slant route alone in games since at least 2020. So this guy is Michael Thomas reincarnated, but he's playing with Patrick Mahomes and in an offense that is going to score 28 to 30 points a week. If you drafted Rashee Rice, you should just be bouncing off the walls right now. And then in terms of Malik Neighbors, this is just a matchup that we love to pick on in the fantasy community. He's got the Commanders. I came on this show last week. I talked about Chris Godwin, about how he's a must start against the Commanders. That came to fruition. And this is just a secondary that you're going to pick on from a fantasy perspective, week in and week out. It's easy as sweating in a sauna, is what I like to say, is starting your receivers against the Commanders. You just have to do it. Malik Neighbors should dominate this secondary. It's one of the worst in the leagues. And I believe in Malik Neighbors' talent and his ability to take advantage of an incredibly weak matchup.
I love that. We got a couple more questions. These are actually really good ones. This is a more, I would say, expected one. This from Will Holland. He said, who would you start? And this sounds like it's at his flex spot. Jaylen Warren or Justice Hill? So
this one, it's really tough because you didn't get the usage that you wanted to see out of Jaylen Warren, but it kind of came as an expectation. I wrote up an article talking about benching Jaylen Warren last week just because he's coming off of the hamstring injury and you don't really know how he's going to be mixed in, and that did come true. He really wasn't even the 1B in this backfield. It was kind of Najee Harris and then both Cordero Patterson and Warren acting as like the 1C almost. So it really wasn't, there wasn't a second back in this backfield, but I do think that you're gonna have to start Jaylen Warren here because Justice Hill is an incredibly game script dependent running back. This was one of the few games this year that I believe last week was one of the few games this year that I believe the Ravens are going to be playing from behind for a significant portion of the game. And obviously Justice Hill's coming in on those pass catching downs and when the Ravens are trying to move the ball through the air. And I just don't see that happening against the Raiders this week. I think it's going to be a steady dose of King Henry as the Ravens are going to play with a lead for the vast majority of this game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, once again, I do look at their schedule. They do have some tough games later on in the season. So I'd be curious to see, especially people who do have Derrick Henry if you're going to be stashing him. We got a question from Griffin McQuaid. He said, who should I start? 2 wide receivers, Chris Olave versus the Cowboys or Chris Godwin versus Detroit?
This is another one that's tough and I think is pretty enviable of a choice to have. I'm in the long-term perspective, I'm still bought into Chris Olave. I think you still have to be high on him. It seems like this Saints offense is making some dramatic improvements. The question with Chris Olave was never his talent. At least myself and a lot of other people seem to be pretty bought in terms of his talent, in terms of Chris Olave. But the offensive situation was what was causing issues with his fantasy production. And that seems to be changing with Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. But I'm still going Chris Godwin in this spot. I'm just super bullish about his role in the slot in Tampa Bay. We saw last week out of the slot, Cooper Kupp saw 14 targets out of the slot against this Detroit defense. And I'm not saying Chris Godwin is any Cooper Kupp, but now that he's back in the slot running most of his routes out of the slot, Chris Godwin should feast against this Detroit Lions defense and see a steady dose of targets. So if you're in a PPR league, I think the safer play is Chris Godwin. The higher upside play is Chris Olave just because of his dynamic talent and just obviously his age and where he's at in his career. He's an ascending talent in my opinion. So I do think you just still have to go with Godwin here just because he is going to be feasting in terms of his target share.
Completely. And we'll get to some of these questions in a second, but let's continue with your week 2. Give me some more of your players, whether it's somebody that you are, putting your foot down saying this dude is going to have a great week, or even the opposite, a guy that you see a lot of people in the community saying this guy's going to have a great week and you see he's got a tough matchup. So give me a couple, whether it's a wide receiver or a quarterback.
Yeah, I'll go with 2 guys from the same team that I'm looking to start and one I'm looking to sit this week. This matchup for the Jaguars against the Cleveland Browns defense is one that I'm particularly interested in. The guy that I'm looking to jam into my lineup wherever possible is Brian Thomas Jr. This is a guy I raved about throughout the offseason, just the athletic gifts and prospect profile. It's just something that doesn't come through very often, especially combining those athletic gifts with legitimate talent at the wide receiver position. You don't see it very often. So I was super high on him, and he went out and showed that he is capable of being the alpha in this offense. He didn't get off to a slow start like we see with a lot of rookie receivers. He was running a route on 78% of Jacksonville's dropbacks, and he was targeted on 22% of his routes, which are both really strong numbers for someone in their first career NFL game. And obviously this was the day was highlighted by his first NFL touchdown on a beautiful throw from Trevor Lawrence. If you haven't seen those clips on Twitter or wherever, I would highly suggest you go check them out. That was just an incredible throw, but that wasn't even his best play of the day. I think the best play of the day was one that's not even going to show up in the box score. He absolutely torched Jalen Ramsey 40 yards down the field on a deep post, and he drew a pretty bad pass interference penalty. And you saw Ramsey really just give him respect for the rest of the game, and just him showing that he can beat up these insane corners, all pro corners like Jalen Ramsey. It's really encouraging. But looking to his matchup this week, it's not great against the Browns. The Cowboys did pick them apart last week, but I'm still encouraged by this matchup. I think he's going to take advantage of his reps against Martin Emerson, who I believe is one of the weaker outside corners in the NFL. So I think he'll be able to take advantage of the reps where he's not lined up against Denzel Ward. But moving to the other not other side of the ball, but the other receiver in this offense, Christian Kirk. I'm not very sold on his matchup this week. It was a wishy-washy week 1 for him. He only had 4 PPR points, but his role within the offense was still strong. I think he's going to bounce back this year. I think he's going to be a steady PPR compiler type, but I just don't think it's going to come against the Browns. Kirk is the primary slot receiver in this offense. He took 70% of his routes out of the slot last week. And now that he's lining up in the slot against the Browns, I don't like this matchup at all. He's going to face off against Greg Newsome II, who I believe is one of the stronger slot corners in the NFL. Last week when he was lined up against CeeDee Lamb, he only allowed 1 reception for 3 yards. And CeeDee Lamb is just a different caliber of receiver than Christian Kirk. I've been really high on his talent since he was at Northwestern. I'm a bit of a Northwestern homer, but I do think Greg Newsome is an incredibly talented slot corner, and you see it in the numbers. One of the highest graded PFF corners out of the slot in the NFL. But I just don't like this matchup for Christian Kirk at all. He completely boxed CeeDee Lamb last week, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kirk comes to a similar fate.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's something that was surprising, even when looking at the last game. I think that's another guy that's going to have a great week is CeeDee Lamb. So if you can give me one more guy that you're looking at specifically whether it's, it can be any position, but a guy that you're saying, hey, this dude is going to have a massive week this week. It could even be a quarterback if you want.
Yeah, for the quarterback, I think I'm looking to Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, the Cooper Kupp Matthew Stafford mind meld is just fully back. With Puka Nacua off the field, I mean, we saw him get 21 targets last week. It was just absolutely insane. It's like it's Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers, and then it's Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford in terms of just having that connection and being able to find each other and know exactly where the other is going to be on the field at all times. It's really just something that you enjoy seeing on the football field as a football fan, regardless of what team you support. But this is a matchup that I think is going to be incredibly strong for Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp's connection. You saw all of the injuries that they suffered to the offensive line last week. I think they've put at least 2 guys on IR. They may be down as many as 4 starters to their offensive line this week. So I really expect this offense to run through the passing attack, and Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford are obviously the 2 key pieces of that. The Arizona defense is about as bad as it gets as an entire unit in the NFL. And I did think we saw some signs of an up and coming offense last week against the Bills. They were holding their own for the vast majority of the game last week in Buffalo. So I think this can really be a back and forth game. And I do believe that on the Los Angeles side of the ball, they will be leaning on Matthew Stafford's arm. So I think he has a really strong chance to finish within the top 12 quarterbacks this week.
Completely. And we got some questions, and I kind of want you to touch on real quick the defense side of things. Naughty to Slurp said, how do you feel about the Chargers defense?
What was that name again?
Naughty to Slurps.
Elite name, my
That's
man.
crazy.
Elite name.
It's a great name. He said, how do you feel about the Chargers defense as well as just overall? What would you say is another defense that whether people are on the waiver wire or people that drafted should be looking at?
Yeah, you have to be excited about starting the Chargers defense this week. I mean, there's a couple of rules in fantasy football in these last couple of years, and one of them is start your wide receivers against the Commanders, and the other one is start the defense against the Panthers. I mean, the Panthers offense just seemingly, you guys were talking about it before I was on, it seemingly has made 0 improvements year over year. It's one that I just don't think is going to be a strong offense whatsoever. And until we see some legitimate changes, this is not this is one to target in the NFL or in fantasy football. When you're playing defenses in fantasy football, I'm of the belief that you should not just set it and forget it a single defense every single week. It's I think that you should be streaming defenses, and targeting the Panthers defense is one that I think, or the Panthers offense rather, is a matchup that I will be continuously looking to target until something changes. But the other one that I think you should be targeting this week is the Steelers defense. And that one is less of a streamer. It's they're going to be owned. They're a really, really strong defense. We saw them just absolutely box out the Atlanta Falcons last week. Kirk Cousins looked like he was in shambles. You can talk about his health. You can talk about whatever you want, but TJ Watt and Joey Porter Jr. just completely wrecked everything that they were trying to do. And they square off against the Denver Broncos this week, another rookie quarterback who will be looking to take advantage of here. Some people believe that Bo Nix can fit well with Sean Payton's scheme and that short little dink and duck passing attack, but I really do think that we're going to see another game of Joey Porter Jr. locking down the top receiver this week. It'll be Cortland Sutton, and TJ Watt just having his way in the backfield.
Yeah, and that's something that does concern me because I am personally a Cortland Sutton owner, but thankfully I don't have to start him this week. We got one more question from Keith. He said, likely or Bowers? And this kind of we can touch on.
Likely.
Likely?
Likely, I would say likely personally.
So this one, it is really, really close for me. I'm probably going to go with Brock Bowers here. It's just a bet on the talent. So likely it's hard. So last week against the Chiefs, the Ravens were running a lot of 12 personnel, more than we really have ever seen. And that doesn't come as a shock because they did see what Likely was able to do in relief of Mark Andrews last year. But then when they were running out of 11 personnel, so formations with the primary formation with only one tight end on the field, they were ping-ponging, Likely and Andrews were ping-ponging the snaps. So it's tough to to get high-end fantasy production when you're not seeing a full complement of snaps. And we'll see how that shakes out in week one. It's too hard to lean into, or in week two, rather. It's too hard to lean into it after just one game. But Brock Bowers, he's in a kind of a similar situation. He's ping-ponging snaps with Michael Mayer, but he just earned targets at an elite rate. He saw a target on 28% of the routes that he ran last week, which was better than Devontae Adams. And obviously I don't expect that to hold, but it just shows you that this guy is like the second focal point of this offense. I believe that Isaiah Likely is still third in the pecking order. And like I said, I do think that this is a game script that will favor the Raiders throwing the ball. These two guys are going to be going head to head this week. I do think that the Ravens offense will be running the ball at a really high clip, much higher clip than we saw against the Chiefs. So I just think in terms of total potential volume, I think it goes to Brock Bowers. In terms of talent, I think it leans Brock Bowers. So I would be picking Bowers in this spot.
Well, Mike, you gave us a lot there. I just so we're clear, I was not going against Mike. In any way, shape, or form. How would you say?
I said someone's got to go against me every once in a while.
Well, I want to be clear. I wasn't going against Mike. I was just simply saying Isaiah Likely is a guy that I was been high on since the Coastal Carolina days. I'm by no means a fantasy football expert. I leave that to you, to Steve, and I value you guys' input. And if he's saying start Brock Bowers, well, that's why he is on the show. He is going to help you win your fantasy football leagues. Mike, looking forward to having you on the show next week again, my man. We appreciate you. Make sure you guys follow all his work that he does here at TWSN. Follow him. His name is literally right below him. And listen, man, I hope that you have a very good week too for fantasy football for yourself, man. I hope you enjoy the games on Sunday.
Yep, you too, Malik. We're looking to take a clean sweep on Sunday.
Let's make it happen, man. I'll talk to you.
Catch up with you guys later.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show presented by TWSN. And again, Friday is Fantasy Football Fridays here at TWSN. We still got to get you guys all set for our favorite bets of NFL Week 2. And you guys can get my favorite bets for UFC 306 taking place this week. Sean O'Malley defending his belt against Merab Dvalishvili. But before we do, we want to keep it with fantasy football. And it wouldn't be a Fantasy Football Friday if we didn't also have another one of TWSN fantasy analysts here, Steve Bradshaw. Steve, how's it going, my man?
Pretty good. Not too bad. Just got to watch Dalton Kincaid disappoint me for another week yesterday, so I'm not as optimistic as Monday or, earlier, but I'm doing okay, man. How about you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. This is why I retired from fantasy. Fantasy used to control so much for me, but you know what? I had to retire while I was on top. So that's what I tell people. But man, we gotta hear from you. Get some of the fantasy matchups that you're really looking forward to. We know that we have some questions still down here for you to answer as well. I know some people have some questions. One of the questions that I want to get to is it's from Griffin McQuaid. Did we answer that already?
Not the same league as before.
The same. No, we didn't answer that, right? Okay. Same league as before with Olave/Godwin. Who should I play at running back 2? Chase Brown versus Kansas City, Zamir White versus Baltimore, Jaleel McLaughlin versus Pitt, or Jordan Mason versus Minnesota?
Ooh, I mean, if McCaffrey doesn't play, the obvious answer is Jordan Mason. If he does, then I would probably go Zamir White. It's pretty gross outside of Mason. I think Mason is going to be a top 10 back. I currently have him ranked as my RB9, assuming CMC doesn't play. But if that's not the case, then I would go Zamir White. He's my RB25 on the week, so fringe running back 2. And even though it didn't look great, Alexander Mattison was the fantasy productive back last time and getting a lot of the, receiving work. I don't think it's the right move to give up on him completely after week 1. I think that he's still a solid player. And compared to Chase Brown, he didn't look good at all. Jaleel McLaughlin looks solid, but I'm definitely not ready to start him yet. I think Javonte will get a little bit of a bigger workload in week 2. So I go Zamir White just because he has that guaranteed role. And could back himself into some RB2 numbers just based on the touches he should see this week.
You know,
when Steve, I'm looking at I was looking at my fantasy team and I need a little help, to be honest with you. I've got a couple guys, and this is kind of my question to you would be, who would you start? And obviously this matters about health and everything, but and I'm sitting pretty right now. It's between Kenneth Walker if he's healthy or Jordan Mason if he's healthy.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm going to go Jordan Mason still.
Okay.
I have Mason at 9, Walker at 13, and I also have Mason a tier ahead of him. I think Mason should absolutely crush if CMC doesn't play. I mean, again, we saw how good he was last week against the Vikings. I like that matchup as well. So, yeah, give me Mason. But Kenneth Walker's a great option as well if CMC does end up playing.
Beautiful. Hopefully Mason does play. But Steve, it's the time of the show. Talk to us about some of your guys this week, right? You've done the research, you've done the time. Who are some of the guys that you're looking at that are hammers for this week for sure in your lineup? And even on the other side, guys that you're saying, hey, get him the hell out of my lineup.
Yeah, staying at running back, I was looking at some ESPN projections for the week because I know a lot of people play in typical home leagues, and they have him as the RB26 this week. But I'm absolutely starting Aaron Jones against the 49ers. I get it. It's probably not going to be an opportunity where they can run the ball a ton in the second half. But Aaron Jones is a great pass-catching back anyway. He's going to be out there catching passes, running the ball in the first half. And he's just a player that I wasn't super high on for the entire season and a guy that I wanted to draft. But that's just because of his age. That's because he's 29 years old. So as long as he's shown that he's on the field, isn't turning to dust, I'm ranking him pretty highly. I have him as my RB20, so a mid to low-end RB2, but there's no way I'm leaving him out of my starting lineups this week after he just had a phenomenal, I believe, 18-point performance in week 1.
Yeah, he had a great performance, and that's something where a lot of people, you're right, they are down because he's got a matchup against the 49ers. But let's switch it over. What about wide receiver? Who are some of the guys that you're saying, hey, this guy needs to be in your lineup?
I'm really liking Malik Neighbors. He's projected to be the wide receiver 28 on the week for ESPN. But he's a guy I love coming in, I will admit. And I get the panic here. It's because Daniel Jones looked completely terrible. I'm not too optimistic that that's going to turn around, even though I actually was a little optimistic coming into the year. I thought Jones had some talent, clearly not showing it right now, but they have a pretty good matchup for the Neighbors and the Giants. They're playing the Commanders, who are almost equally as bad of a team. They're not great either. So it should be a pretty close game. I don't really see a blowout, and they're going to have to rely on Neighbors for that game if they want to have a chance to win. The over-under is also at 44 points, which is pretty surprising and also not bad for the week. So anytime you get a guy like Malik Neighbors, he's facing an uphill battle with how bad his quarterback play is and situation is every single week. And he still had 11 points in week 1. So now where it's probably at least mutual game script, mutual situation, I'm definitely betting on that elite talent because he's a guy that could go off if his quarterback play is a little bit better, if his situation is, just solid for the week.
And especially without a great rushing game, we could see him get peppered with targets, especially against a terrible, terrible secondary. Let's switch it over to tight end real quick. Tight end week 1 was, and I believe, you touched on this on Twitter a little bit, was abysmal for all these tight ends. Is there any player that you're looking at that's saying, hey, this guy could be a bounce back, or this guy's a guy that is on your waiver wire right now that you need to go and get him into your lineups?
Yeah, waiver wire, so is a little different than my start of the week, but a guy I really like is going to be Colby Parkinson. If you can get him from the Rams, I think he's the guy that actually benefits the most from that Puka Nacua injury, which was also disappointing. I had him as my first-round pick in my friends league. I had to trade him away within like 12 hours of the news before anyone could look too far into that. But besides the point, I think he's a guy that I really like coming into the year. He's might not be available anymore on your waiver wires. I know he got snagged in a few of ours, but 8.7 points week 1, 4 receptions, 47 yards. And he's a guy that is a pretty decent talent. And the Rams really don't have anything else. I mean, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson are both mediocre option at best. I think Parkinson's better than both of them. And he actually showed some flashes in Seattle. I think he's a solid player, and the role where Puka Nacua is opening up should give him some more targets and give him a better shot on playing next to Cooper Kupp on the field.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I watched that Sunday Night Football game, and he's the dude. As soon as Puka went out, I mean, dude got peppered with targets. So I'm with you. And especially in a league, and especially in a year where tight ends aren't super consistent. So if you could go get 4 receptions, I love that. Let's switch it over to what about some of the guys that you aren't high on? Some guys that either have a tough matchup or guys that you say, hey, this dude had a great week 1, but he's not going to have a great week 2.
Yeah, one guy that I wouldn't say people are super high on, but ESPN still has Najee Harris projected out as the RB24. And there's just no reason why I'm putting him in my starting lineup unless I absolutely have to.
Okay.
Had 8.9 points in week 1, so not like he absolutely crushed, but he wasn't terrible either. And I think people are kind of going to be a little too optimistic. But I don't understand why he's going to have a better week 2. Jaylen Warren ended up playing, and he should be a little healthier. Not that I think that actually matters too much because Najee's going to get the workload regardless. But if anything, that's going to be a slight knock against him. Harris just looked absolutely awful. He had 3.5 yards per carry. And against the Broncos, they should win this game somewhat easily. I think the Broncos aren't a great team. And I don't know. I just don't see it. It's going to be a disgustingly low scoring game with a 36.5 over-under. So normally I can be like, maybe he'll find his way into the end zone if there's going to be a lot of points put up. No, I don't think so there. So I just absolutely do not like starting Najee Harris unless I absolutely have to.
Steve, there's no Mike Gesicki love for you?
I actually like Gesicki, but
Uh-huh.
I mean, honestly, I don't think he got on my radar. He had that touchdown called back, no, in week 1.
Yeah, he had that touchdown call back, and he be honest with you, his snaps were very limited when he was in the game. I almost thought I was watching. I almost felt like I was watching the New England Patriots Mike Gesicki again. It's like, why is that guy not in the game? So I have my thoughts on things. I'm happy to see that you're a Mike Gesicki fan. The reason why I bring him up is because I feel like this week he has a favorable matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think that they have anybody that has an answer for that guy. And I think this is an opportunity we can take advantage of. That's just my 2 cents. Again, people might say you're a homer. I'm going to keep beating the Mike Gesicki drum for the next 2 to 3 weeks. If nothing happens from there, I'll digress, if you will. But I still think that Mike Gesicki is going to have a big game sooner rather than later here for the Bengals. I just wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that.
No, I think people are kind of underrating the Bengals-Chiefs matchup with how bad the Bengals looked in week 1. I'm sorry. But I think they're going to bounce back. I still have faith in, you guys. And I think it should be a very high-scoring game. So I don't hate that call at all. I think Gesicki is talented. I'm not as tapped into the Bengals. So if you think that he's going to get on the field a little more in week 2, then I definitely would not hate starting him as, a tight end 11, tight end 12, because at that point, you're just basically throwing a dart anyway. And I want to get a guy with touchdown upside in what should be a high-scoring game. So, yeah, no, I definitely don't hate it at all. I think Gesicki has the talent. It's just the question of whether he's going to be utilized on a consistent basis, which unfortunately hasn't been the case so far in his career.
Right. You can't have guys like Tanner Hudson start over him is my thought process, and then fumbling at the goal line. Steve, thank you so much, man, for spending your Fridays with us, man, getting us all caught up for week 2 NFL. We got another question. I don't know if did we get the Sean Brennan's question, Daniel, the last one?
Not the last one, no.
Well, let me ask you this. When it comes to the flex position, do you prioritize wide receiver over running back, or do you put more emphasis on talent and matchup?
Yeah, so it depends on your league, especially if you're in a PPR league. I would emphasize wide receivers over running backs just because those players have a little bit of a higher floor and ceiling. So I think wide receivers, for the most part, will outscore running backs on a week-to-week basis in that format. Also, you're just seeing wide receivers are just being drafted much higher than running backs nowadays because of the opportunity. because it is more of a passing league. So, yeah, normally in PPR leagues, I would be looking for wide receiver over running back, but definitely it's a case-by-case basis. I do look at talent and matchup in my flex. If there's a guy that flex is where I feel like I can make a little more of a risky play. I have my guys that I can set and forget as my wide receiver 1 and 2, RB1 and 2. But if there's a guy that I'm really high on, say like Malik Neighbors is the perfect example. If you were able to draft him in your flex, he's a guy that I love starting because when he has a good matchup, the talent is there. Yeah, I want to get him in my starting lineup because he has the shot to go for 20, 25 points because he's an absurdly talented player versus, maybe some other guys like, I don't know, off the top of my head, Cortland Sutton. He's a fine player, probably going to get you 10 to 12 points every week, but he doesn't have the same level of talent or maybe as great of a matchup for the week, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. Steve, again, man, I want to thank you so much, man. I don't know how you fared in your fantasy football leagues after week 1, but I hope that you continue to have a profitable and successful week 2 of the NFL season. We're looking forward to having you back on next week so we could talk fantasy football, the good, the bad, and the ugly, my man. I hope that you have an awesome week, and I hope you enjoy the games, my man.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I will say it was a solid week, but to give you a quick example, Puka Nacua was the guy I had as my first round pick in my friends and family league or home league. And then in my dynasty league, I had Jordan Love in the Superflex. So it could have been better, but
yeah. Well, I'll say this. I can't offer up, you any fantasy football advice, but here's what I will say. If you have Mike Gesicki in your fantasy football league, I would start him this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. No, but in all seriousness, thanks so much, my man.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be talking this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. Have a good
one. Of course,
one.
as always, man. Always, man. Appreciate you. Make sure you guys give Steve a follow. It's Steve Bradshaw. Him and Michael O'Hara do some amazing work here at TWS, and we're very fortunate to have those guys on the team and as a friends of the show that help you guys get all caught up for your fantasy football league. I'm going to ask you guys to do us a favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios or when we have Know Thy Enemy coming out, right? We got Know Thy Enemy coming out tonight at 7 p.m., which are my co-host for State of the Jungle, Evan McPhillips, will be doing a deep dive as to keys to victory for the Bengals to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a really, really interesting segment that I'm happy that he launched. And yes, a lot of cool stuff. But this is my favorite part of the show right here. This is where we get into some of our bets, our favorite bets for NFL Week 2. And then I'll get you all squared away for my favorite bets for UFC 306. Want to remind you all that if you want access to all of our plays, subscribe to the TWSN Patreon. On there, you will find our entire team's picks from the NFL, the UFC, and when the NBA is in season. If you look right above me, that's where the QR code should be. So again, if you don't have the link should be in the description. But if you don't have the link, you can scan the QR code and get our best bets to make yourself some money. We had a profitable we were very profitable last week. We're going to be very profitable this week. When I say we have a dedicated team that literally sits down and analyzes and puts in the work to help make your weekends amazing, I truly mean that, myself included. But Daniel, I got to hear from you. What are your favorite week 2 NFL bets?
I've been waiting for this, man, and we've got some good ones in store. And once again, go to the Patreon for full plays. There's a lot I like, and I'm going to start it out with my favorite matchup of the week. It's the Commanders versus the Giants. I think there is a lot of value in this, and the first thing I penciled down when I went and looked at this game, it was Terry McLaurin. It was Terry McLaurin versus the Giants, and Terry, when I went back and rewatched the Commanders game, the dude had 2 deep balls where he absolutely cooked the cornerback, and Jane Daniels barely missed him on both. So McLaurin had 5 total targets. He only had 16 yards, I believe. But when I look at his potential matchup for this game, I think the dude could crack 100 yards. I think that this is the first game where the coaching staff said, hey, we are not going to we hope that Jaden Daniels doesn't run it 18 times a game. And that would mean you're going to pass the ball a little more. And the number one target on this team is Terry McLaurin. So I think that his line right now is at currently 49.5. So if I could get a dude at 49.5, I think that I'm taking his line first off straight up. And I'm also going to look at Terry McLaurin as some sprinkles, guys. I think that this is a great week. And typically how I do my bets is I will go and I will take specific player matchups. So I'll take one matchup at a time and I'll place a single bet. Let's say I'll place a single bet on Terry McLaurin to get 50 yards. That's my major bet. I'll go throw, a couple hundred on that. And then I'll do a little sprinkle on a parlay that's a long shot. So my long shot for Terry would be 100 plus yards. And I think that's realistic. I could see a world where Terry goes and gets one huge deep ball for 60, 50, 40 yards. And that gets you almost halfway there to his 100 yards. And his 100 yards is plus 560. So if you go bet Terry McLaurin to get 100 yards, $100 on that pays out $660. So that's my first matchup that I absolutely love. The next game I really want to touch on for props wise is the Rams versus the Cardinals. This is a game that, in my opinion, is props galore. It really is on either side. I think both defenses have a ton of holes. And the first prop I want to look at is Kyren Williams for the Los Angeles Rams, right? If you guys don't know about the Rams running back situation, there was a lot of turmoil. At first, it was, okay, is it a running back by committee? In week one, we didn't see that. We saw Kyren Williams taking 94% of the snaps. And in his past two games against the Arizona Cardinals, the dude had 120 rushing yards and he had 150. So I'm looking at Kyren Williams over 75 rushing yards. That's the straight up play. And then I'll look at a sprinkle for Kyren Williams to have 100 plus rushing yards. I think it's a great matchup. We saw what James Cook for the Buffalo Bills did last week against the Arizona Cardinals. Their rushing defense is not great. So give me Kyren Williams on a great matchup against the Cardinals. We have Matt Reichel. We appreciate you. He's one of our major supporters for the Patreon. He said, any bets on Xavier Worthy versus the Bengals? Honestly, I don't think that's the route you want to go for the Chiefs. I think that there's a couple ways to bet the Kansas City Chiefs. If you like the Chiefs to win, go bet them to win by more than a touchdown. If you like the passing attack, I think Rashee Rice is the way to go, because Rashee Rice is a guy where, like our guy Michael Hara was talking about, he caught 6 passes on 6 slants in his week 1 matchup. So I look at the week 1 matchup against the Ravens, and I think that this is a much more favorable matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think Rashee Rice, take his over in receptions, take Rashee Rice's over in receiving yards. I think he's got a great matchup. And if there's anything I like for the Chiefs, I would definitely look at Rashee Rice. But if you want to sprinkle on Xavier Worthy, sprinkle on him to get a touchdown. He is a guy that's a gadget guy. He's a guy that they use all over the place. So if there's anything you want on Xavier Worthy, I would definitely go and sprinkle on his touchdown. There's another prop I like, and I'm going with the under. And I'm going with the under on a player that has a brutal matchup. And this is a matchup where he's facing a defense that's surprisingly good, and that's the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans defense surprised the hell out of me, and they surprised a lot of people in week 1 where they were one of the best rushing defenses in the league. You go look back at the second half of last year with DeMeco Ryans, their rushing attack and their rushing defense is very good. And what did they do in week 1? They held Jonathan Taylor to a abysmal performance in week 1. So I'm looking at their matchup. It's DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift is a guy where, yes, they paid him a lot of money, but they got Khalil Herbert. They got, Roschon Johnson. And I see DeAndre Swift's rushing yards at 42.5. I see a world on Sunday Night Football where the Texans get out to a big lead, just like the Titans did against them in week 1. And I don't think they're going to throw the ball or run the ball a ton. So DeAndre Swift's under 42.5 rushing yards. That's one of my favorite under plays of the week. And everybody loves taking overs, and I do too. But if you can find a good under spot, like yesterday, Tyreek Hill's under 99 receiving yards, that was an easy, you didn't have to sweat about it. The dude had 20 something yards. So DeAndre Swift under 42.5 rushing yards. If there's another rushing prop I like, and this is one where this was touched on, in the fantasy segment a little bit with the Packers, Josh Jacobs I think Josh Jacobs has an amazing matchup, and I think he's in a perfect spot. You look at the Packers, most likely it seems Jordan Love is not playing in this game, and if it's confirmed that Jordan Love is not going to play, they got Malik Willis. And what are they going to do with Malik Willis? They are not going to throw the ball a ton. So they're going to have to run the ball, and it's Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs in his week 1 matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, he looked damn good. And I wasn't expecting him to. So Josh Jacobs not only has a great matchup against the Colts, who Joe Mixon just ran wild on, but he's also got the opportunity where there isn't another running back in the running back room that's healthy. There's not another running back that's going to take a lot of the snaps. And I see his line at 64.5. I think this is far too low for a workhorse running back who's got, going to have at least 15 rushes, and they're going to be hammering the ball with Josh Jacobs because if we're going to be honest, they're not going to throw it 30 plus times for Malik Willis. That would be a terrible game plan for Matt LaFleur. That would be going against everything that's been happening in Malik Willis's career. And every single time he started, his running back, he's only had 4 starts in the NFL, but his running back average 140 rushing yards in the games that Malik Willis started. So I think we're going to see a heavy rushing attack for the Green Bay Packers. I think Josh Jacobs clears his 64.5 rushing yards, and I think that line is far too low. I'd even sprinkle him up to 100 plus rushing yards.
There's a lot of games that you could bet on this week, and we hope that you guys will choose to utilize TWSN to help make you some money this weekend. Make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. Want to head on over to the UFC. UFC 306 is taking place this weekend. I'm going to give you guys some props that I'm looking at. If you want to get my full bets for the card, I'm going to ask that you guys subscribe to the channel. That's where we'll have our bets. I'm going to do a quick run through of this before we head out of here. So one of the props that I'm looking at for this card, not definitely sold on yet, but Ronaldo Rodriguez, who you guys heard me touch on that a little bit earlier, is taking on Odie Osborne this week. And I love the prop for him to win by KO or TKO or submission, double chance on FanDuel. Sitting at plus 145. Listen, Odie Osborne is a guy that likes to sometimes mirror his opponents, right? And sometimes he is, last to go. Odie has all the talent in the world, but if you are not beating your opponent to the punch-up points and you're mirroring almost what they do, they're able to sometimes have you in this lull type of position where all of a sudden you're just out of place. You're just out of whack, and you're just not able to put it all together. And I feel like that's been the situation with Odie Osborne's career, right? Very talented striker, not as talented when the fight gets to the ground. Has the ability to keep the fight standing, has good takedown defense. When you get that fight to the ground, he becomes very normal, I'll say. I think Ronaldo Rodriguez has true power in his hands, and I think he also has the ability to submit a guy like Odie Osborne, who we've seen submitted in his career before. In this fight, I think Ronaldo Rodriguez is able to take advantage of this. I also want to keep it going. I see our guy Will Hollins in the comment section saying he's going to take Brian Ortega as the underdog. He just does not care. Well, I would care. Diego Lopez is a guy that I just think is defensively sound. He's a guy that is going to pressure Brian Ortega. He's a guy that is going to make Brian T. City Ortega work. And while I agree, I made an error the other day when I said I felt like Diego Lopez is better than Brian Ortega everywhere. He's not better in jiu-jitsu, but he is better with the grappling. He is better with the striking. And I think as long as the fight goes, he's going to make a guy like Ortega work. I think Diego Lopez is the new featherweight regime, and I think Diego Lopez will be fighting for a championship sooner rather than later. I understand why a lot of people are excited about Brian T. City Ortega after his recent performance, and it's going to cause you to think that, okay, this guy Ortega is ready. He's ready for this tough test. But I'll put it this way. Odds makers don't like losing money, right? They don't like losing money. Why? Why would they make a guy like Brian Ortega the underdog against a guy in Diego Lopez, who, let's be honest with you, this is a step up in competition, but they don't see it that way. They don't view this as a step up in competition. They view this as this is going to be a big test for Brian Ortega. And honestly speaking, it really should be, because I think when you look at what Diego Lopez has been able to do in his career in a short amount of time, the way he was able to just dismantle a guy like Sadiq Youssef, that should tell you all there it is, all you need to know, so to speak, about him. This is a guy in Diego Lopez, right, who not only has, a lot of people see guys fight and they talk about what what they're going to do to their opponent. But they don't talk about what their opponent's going to do to him. So when I get on here and I speak so glowingly about a guy like Diego Lopez, isn't it just because what he does to his opponents? It's what he's been able to withstand in his career. This is a guy that took Joe Anderson Brito, who's an absolute killer, an absolute finisher, to the brink. Joe Anderson Brito hit him with some big shots. Joe Anderson Brito even tried to sneak in a submission and had it deep locked in, and he wasn't able to wilt. So you mean to tell me you think Brian Ortega's boxing, albeit good boxing, but it's like jiu-jitsu boxing, you think Brian Ortega's boxing or his ability to get the fight to the ground somehow, even though he's not stronger than a guy like Diego Lopez, is going to be able to get him home against a guy like Diego Lopez? I'm not buying it. I think Diego Lopez wins this fight. I think Diego Lopez hurts Brian Ortega. Hell, I'm going to go out on a limb. I think Diego Lopez submits Brian Ortega. I think it's one of those situations where Brian Ortega is literally the featherweight version of Dustin Poirier, in my opinion. Tough, always brings it, but just not good enough to, make it all the way. And I think it's because when you face tough opponents like this, if you believe Diego Lopez is going to win via submission, right? Because they both are great submission specialists. And I actually think this fight might play out on the ground because I think Brian Ortega is going to be willing to test his ability against a guy like Diego Lopez. And I think Diego is going to also be willing to test his ability against a guy like Brian Ortega. If he goes out there and he submits Brian Ortega, he puts himself firmly in the featherweight title picture. If you believe Diego is going to win by submission, it's plus 600. It's plus 600. If you believe Diego Lopez is going to win by KO or submission, it's plus 165. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, all I smell around me is a potential finish on the side of Diego Lopez. I think Diego Lopez finishes Brian Ortega. And I think if you take that prop, I think that you're walking away feeling pretty confident. I think you walk away feeling pretty confident. There are some fights that I'm looking at, like Raul Rosas Jr. taking on a Richie Lang. I love this fight. I think the odds are very juiced. Raul Rosas is a minus 1,200 favorite, as he should be. He shouldn't have. Let me just say this right now. He has no business standing with a Richie Lang. No business. I think Chiwiwi is going to be smart this fight, and I think he's going to find a way to get this fight to the ground. And if he gets the fight to the ground, I'm going to tell you right now, Richie Lang is very durable in the first round. I'm willing to bet Richie Lang might even crack Raul Rosas Jr. in the first round. You might be being able to get better odds. But if you're looking for a method of victory, I think Raul Rosas Jr. wins this fight via submission, sitting at minus 160. Hell, if you believe Raul Rosas Jr. could make quick work of him, I found a prop on FanDuel that I love even more. You go over to method and round combo. You take Raul Rosas Jr. to win via submission at plus 200 in the first round, or plus 370 in the second round.
By submission?
If you think he's going to win by submission, you pick Raul Rosas Jr. to end the fight in those rounds. Either way, Raul Rosas Jr. beats Richie Lang, and it sits pretty. Let's keep it going. There are some other fights on this card that I'm looking at. Obviously, I talked about Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. I think Alexa Grasso wins this fight. I think it does go to the decision. I don't see a finish on either side. And I think we might see Valentina Shevchenko put the gloves down, unless she chooses that she's going to move up or something like that. I think Sean O'Malley is also going to knock out Merab Davashvili in the main event. I believe that in my heart. I think Sean O'Malley is entering into his prime as an athlete. And I think that the cut on Merab is going to be cause for concern. So when I say KO, I don't necessarily just mean knocking out cold. It could just be a TKO stoppage because of the cut. But I do think Sean O'Malley is going to do enough damage to where this fight is going to end inside the distance. Listen, those are some of my favorite props for UFC 306. If you want to know what you should be betting on, subscribe to the TWSN Patreon. Again, the QR code is right above me. And make yourselves some damn money. Listen, we want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to an episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show presented by TWSN. We hope that you guys enjoy the content. We hope that you appreciate us bringing it to you each and every single day. We'll be back live on Monday, same time, 10 a.m. But I'll be live after the Bengals game, as I do after every game. breaking it all down, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Daniel, I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to add for UFC. I want to make sure I gave you an opportunity before we head out of here, because I know you typically like to have those clippable viral moments. So if there's something that you wanted to say, you seem like you were itching over there to say something. That wasn't
no.
positive. Okay.
I guess just quick parlay I would do, and this is just a simple one. I would take your advice on Diego Lopez. I would just straight up take Diego Lopez money line and Sean O'Malley money line, parlay those two, and I'd call it a day, to be honest. There's some good props we'll have on the Patreon, but to me, a lot of times when I got too cute with certain things, I tend to get too cute, and that's what messes me up. So for me, that's my number one moneymaker I would do. Take your advice with Lopez. Take him to win, because I think he is going to win this. Brian Ortega had a great last showing. But Lopez, O'Malley money line, call it a day. I'm good.
And book it just like that. You just simply book it. Again, thank you guys for spending your mornings with us. And remember, there's only one way you should be waking up at 10 a.m. Eastern time, watching sports, talking sports, and having this discussion.